Kia ora koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai. Welcome to this Labour Party conference final act. Kia ora koutou katoa, nau mai, haere mai. Welcome along to the final act of the Labour Conference 2022. To start with, ladies and gentlemen, give it up again for Tone 6. How good was that? Not to be confused with the singing group I lead called Tone Deaf. Amazing, absolutely brilliant. I want to also acknowledge our Anuenua Cook Island drum group who are with us today. Thank you for being here. And I also want to make note of some of the amazing art that is around this building and that you've seen today from our Pacifica artists. We have art within the room from Uli Anai, Koro and Whitcliffe, Sulieta Fiamae Burrows and Tui Emma Gillies, Jeffrey Kalauta and Sione Falatu. Give it up for them, amazing work. I want to make a special acknowledgement to Sione, who I think is here in the hall tonight. He's the person who did the great video that you saw at the start, and there's going to be some more graphics from Sione as well. Absolute proof that Peter Williams-Seo is right about the 6 Bs or the 8 Bs, maybe 10 Bs after today. What an amazing, amazing thing this has been. A special conference for the Labour Party for 3 reasons, I think. The first of those is to see our Labour whānau up close and not just through a screen. The second thing that I think is really special about this conference is some people aren't as short or as tall as I thought they were on the screen. Amazing. And the third's to be able to reaffirm our values as a Labour Party, as the party of progress and the party that will win in 2023. Ladies and gentlemen, I want to acknowledge everybody who has helped put this conference together, to our South Auckland Labour team, to the Fraser House team, to New Zealand Council, to every one of the volunteers. Homaita paki paki for them. I am seriously worried about anyone in South Auckland who expects to sleep tonight. So at the start, I want to be even-handed and wish Tō Samoa and Matamae Tonga good luck to both. I understand Anahila will find the Samoan song tomorrow sometime. Actually, Anahila, I want to congratulate you for not coming up on the stage during that. But seriously, what an amazing, amazing welcome we have had in South Auckland. What a great place to have the Labour Party's conference in 2022. Thank you all so much for what you have done. And now, delegates, we come to the conference highlight, and no, it is not me singing to you, you'll be pleased to know. We have a speech today from the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern. It's pretty hard to think of a Prime Minister in New Zealand's history who has had to face as many issues as Jacinda Ardern. A terror attack, a volcanic eruption, a global pandemic and more. And then on top of that, in her daily life, she has to deal with tantrums, early morning wake-ups, constant requests for lollies. And on behalf of the caucus, I want to apologise for that. But ladies and gentlemen, through COVID, I've had a ringside seat watching the work of our Prime Minister. As has often been said, there's no playbook for COVID-19. Well, I can tell you, as I've gone around the world and heard from leaders and people on the street in other countries, they know Jacinda Ardern has written the playbook for dealing with COVID-19. Now, the Prime Minister had a significant birthday during COVID, and her staff, who were quite used to her questioning of health officials about everything from vaccines to genomic testing, gave her the most appropriate gift I've ever seen, a stethoscope. Because in addition to being our Prime Minister, she is Dr. Ardern, medicine woman, leader of our health response. Now, many of you will know that the Prime Minister's hero, or one of her heroes, is Ernest Shackleton, a leader who would never ask his team anything more than he would not do. Someone who wasn't afraid to engage in challenges no matter how big or how scary they were. And as the Prime Minister often says, Shackleton said that optimism is true moral courage. Our Prime Minister has optimism and courage in spades. A woman I admire for her strength of courage, her extraordinary intellect and her deep values. So delegates, please join with me in giving your best Labour Party conference welcome to my friend, your leader, our Prime Minister, Jacinda Ardern.
Tēnā koutou katoa. Tēnā koutou katoa. Kua tāwhiti ki tau mātou, haeranga mai kia kore e haere tono. He nui rawa o mahi kia kore e mahi tonu. Kia haere tono tātou. Welcome. It is so fantastic to be here in South Auckland, and it is so fantastic to be here in person with all of you. I want to begin by acknowledging our team here, our wonderful New Zealand councillors, our outgoing and our incoming president, our excellent deputy leader of the Labour Party, Kelvin Davis, our deputy prime minister, our caucus, and most importantly, our members. Our lifeblood and our engine room. Last year, our conference was a little different to this. We gathered in the manner which was traditional in the year 2021, Zoom. Now, there are some distinct advantages to communication from the comfort of your own home. For instance, last conference speech, I was wearing slippers. Our facial lines all miraculously softened. And then there were the filters, which were especially good when they malfunctioned. And by malfunction, I mean basic user error. Like the occasion, I borrowed my Chief of Staff, Raj Nana's laptop for a meeting, flicked the makeup function on and neglected to tell him. At our next officials meeting, complete with senior public servants and ministers, I noticed Raj was desperately trying to cover his face and a fetching shade of lipstick and rouge, which he had no idea how to turn off. I think it's fair to say it's been a time. And while no one expects being in government to be simple, the last few years have not been an easy run. A global pandemic of the scale not seen since the 1918 global influenza outbreak, followed immediately by an economic downturn, the largest in scale since the Great Depression of the 1920s and 30s. Twin health and economic crises that no government in New Zealand history has ever had to contend with. There was no rule book written, but what we did have was a set of values and the history of past Labour governments. It wasn't a rule book, but it was a guide. On the 9th floor of the Beehive building in Wellington, sitting directly behind my desk, is a picture of Michael Joseph Savage. You could say that he's on my shoulder, but also ever so slightly in my ear. Of course, it was Savage and the first Labour government that lifted New Zealand out of the depths of the Great Depression, not by cutting taxes and services, but by investing in jobs and building a social welfare safety net. They built the country's first state home. And not long after these social reforms, New Zealand's living standards were among some of the highest in the world, not for the few, but for the many. The finance minister who supported Savage, Walter Nash, then led Labour's second government as it continued to build our welfare system while advocating on the world stage for peace over war after World War II. It was Norman Kirk and a Labour government who tilted the country towards a modern future with reforms of trade, health, the arts and education. They worked hard to foster a renewed national identity and partnership with Māori, all the while challenging global evils such as apartheid and nuclear testing. It was a fight, David Lange continued, making New Zealand nuclear free while also righting the wrongs of the past by legalising homosexuality and fully abolishing the death penalty. And of course, with Helen Clark, the first woman elected our Prime Minister, New Zealand maintained a principled position on the war in Iraq, while heading a fifth Labour government that improved the economic well-being of Kiwi families by setting up KiwiSaver, the Cullen Superannuation Fund, and working for families. These were all Labour governments that, despite what came their way, never lost sight of the things that matter. And I believe the same can be said about us. We are a government that cares for our people, their jobs, their families, their kids and grandkids, and the earth that they will inherit. Yes, managing crises is an integral part of government, and every Labour government has had their fair share to manage. For us, the list has been a little longer than you'd hope or than you'd imagine, and the pandemic was especially difficult for everyone. Did we always get everything right? No. Could we have done more or done things differently? Yes. But not every country can claim that over 3 years they saved more lives and livelihoods and lived with fewer restrictions than nearly anywhere in the world. Ours is a record that every New Zealander should be rightly proud of. But we've done more than manage crises. We've made progress in spite of them. Before COVID, we said we wanted New Zealand to be the best place in the world to be a child. And so we increased paid parental leave from 18 to 26 weeks. We created the Best Start payment, which restored for the first time in 40 years a universal child payment for families with a newborn. We increased the family tax credit and introduced free lunches and free period products in schools. And now, for all of that, 66,000 children have been lifted out of poverty, and all 9 measures of child poverty in this country are in decline. And those aren't just numbers, those are kids who now have a better shot at school, at getting into work when the time comes, whose parents have the dignity of being able to provide for their children. We said we wanted to build a mental health care system that didn't just exist in times of crisis. So we started building services in GP clinics, iwi providers and youth services. We built and extended Mana Ake, a mental health program for kids at primary and intermediate. And we've put more counsellors in schools too. And now, for the first time, we have an early intervention in our mental health system that has provided 500,000 mental health sessions to Kiwis in need and over 30,000 counselling hours for kids in our schools. We said every New Zealander should have a warm, dry, affordable home, and so we introduced healthy home requirements. We stopped overseas speculators buying residential homes. We evened up the playing field for first home buyers by closing tax loopholes and extending the Bright Line test. We launched the biggest state housing build and Papakainga investment we've seen in decades, and now we have helped 65,000 first home buyers with grants to buy their own homes. We have lifted the share of first home buyers in the market from 20 to 24%, the highest since 2016, and we've created more than 10,000 public housing places. In fact, and this is stunning, this government has created 13% of the total public and community housing stock New Zealand has in just the past 5 years alone. We said we would tackle climate change, so we passed the Zero Carbon Act. We set up the Climate Commission, and we've created an emissions reduction plan. We banned future oil and gas exploration and the installation of new coal boilers. We built incentives and standards, which we have now tripled electric vehicle imports. And we're creating a world-first regime to make sure we reduce agricultural greenhouse gas emissions, which make up just under half of our emissions profile. And we're the Labour Party. So we said we wanted to be a nation where we grew skills, where we invested in our core services, and where everyone had the opportunity to experience of work. And so we invested and increased apprenticeship numbers by a massive 61%. We've supported over 5,000 rangatahi into work through mana and mahi. We've employed 4,000 more nurses and nearly 3,000 more teachers, and have now some of the lowest unemployment on record, including for Māori, in the midst of one of the largest social and economic crises of a generation. Now, this isn't a checklist. This isn't a political scorecard. Behind every one of those numbers is someone's life that has been impacted by a Labour government. Like the gentleman I met in Hawke's Bay, who told me about his brand new kāinga order home where his moko were finally warm. The parents of a new auto electrical apprentice in Gisborne who were so happy their child had stability and certainty. The single mum who wrote to me and said she can now afford for her family to be warm over winter, and the teacher who told me what a difference lunches in schools was making to their kids and their community. These achievements make us a better country. They make us a fairer country. And with the economic storm clouds brewing, they form the strong foundation we need to face the future with confidence. And it is the future I want to talk about today. We have been through tough times, but global volatility still lies in front of us, and 2023 will likely, in many ways, be more difficult than this year. That brings uncertainty and anxiety, and I understand that. So the question next year will be, who is best to help New Zealand navigate these tough times? Who can provide the security and certainty New Zealanders need to get through, with a plan, with confidence, and with optimism? The answer is Labour. The answer is Labour because we have been here before, because we have the track record and the experience, because we can manage a crisis and make progress, because we are not done yet. And in 2023, we're not asking for people to take a leap of faith. We're asking them to look at our record. Now, that doesn't mean considering Labour versus perfection, but Labour versus the opposition, which I would argue is quite some way off perfection. And here is our record in a head-to-head. Despite the biggest economic shock since the Great Depression, the New Zealand economy is bigger now than before COVID, 4.8% bigger. That is because of good economic management. It took nearly 5 years for National to increase the economy by that level after the GFC. Wages are up 17% since 2019. It took National 6 years after the GFC to deliver that. We've had record low unemployment in the past year. In fact, it's half of what it was at the GFC, and that includes for Māori, for Pacifica, and for women. We're on track to return to surplus faster. Our debt is low, with the likes of Australia, the UK, the US, and Canada carrying far more. We have record high prices for our primary sector exports. We've secured new trade agreements with the UK and with the EU and with more to come. Tourists and international students are returning and they are spending. And our underlying economic position is strong. That is not by accident, but through thoughtful decision-making and an eye on putting people and families at the centre of our recovery. Now here, I do want to pay special tribute to Grant Robertson. He is an exceptional Minister of Finance, considered, intelligent and kind. He has taken us through a 1 in 100-year crisis, managing the books while all the while putting people first in our economy, overseeing an upgrade in our infrastructure, in our services and in our global credit ratings. The rating agencies see him as an experienced, safe pair of hands, and there is no one I trust more to keep delivering financial security and stability for our economy and for New Zealand families. Now, if there is one thing COVID taught us, and it schooled us in many ways, it was that we need to be nimble, to keep our eye on the horizon and be willing to act when we need to. Front and centre right now, we have the extraordinary challenges of a cost of living crisis, global in origin but affecting so many Kiwis. Now, we worked quickly to develop a suite of cost of living measures to support Kiwis struggling with rising costs. We introduced the cost of living payment for middle and low income earners. We cut fuel excise by 25 cents a litre. We halved the price of public transport, and we increased working for families. It's a crisis that is still with the world, and so with us too, and clearly more is needed. Right now, the load for families across New Zealand is a heavy one, and while there are many pressures, we know childcare is the biggest in-work expense for families. Traditionally, this has been an area where families have had some support. But over a decade ago, during the GFC, the national government cut childcare assistance so severely that the number of children supported plummeted by half, from over 50,000 in 2010 to fewer than 25,000 this year. Conservative estimates show it is New Zealand women in particular who cannot afford to work if they want to because of childcare costs, and they are foregoing $116 million or more in wages each and every year. This barrier to work exacerbates a workforce shortage, but more than that, it removes the ability for many New Zealand families to choose what is best for them. Now, why did National take away this choice in 2010? Only they can answer that. But I would just note that it was the same year they last cut the top tax rate. It was a massively short-sighted decision. Over the next 10 years, parents, usually women, were increasingly forced into an economic dilemma. I want families to have choices. I want them to stay home and be a primary caregiver if they choose to, or to work if they choose to. But increasingly, those choices have been removed. And if you are a sole parent, you have even fewer. Now, we have tried to restore those choices. We extended paid parental leave. We brought in the Best Start payment. We restored the training incentive allowance and made changes to the in-work tax credit. Last year, we also took the first step of matching income thresholds for the childcare subsidy back to wage growth. ensuring more families didn't lose out. But more is needed. Today I can announce that the Labour government will significantly expand childcare assistance to New Zealand families. From April, we will lift the household income thresholds on our childcare assistance subsidies for those with children under 5 in early childhood education and aged 5 to 13 at an approved before or after school and holiday program. Our changes will mean 54% of all New Zealand families with children will now be eligible for subsidised childcare assistance. Over 10,000 additional children will become eligible for support, and this one's really important. Nearly every sole parent in New Zealand will be eligible for childcare assistance. To give you an example of what this will mean, a family with 2 parents, both working 40 hours per week, on $26 per hour with 2 children under 5, who would not have been eligible for childcare assistance previously, will now be eligible for $252 per week. These changes are on top of the 20 hours of early childcare education provided by the government for those aged 3 to 5 and are a pre-budget commitment that will take effect from April next year at a cost of $48 million a year. Thousands more children supported into early learning, thousands more parents able to enter the workforce, but perhaps most importantly, thousands of parents given back the choice to do what is best for their family. Today I can also share that next year, for the second year in a row, there will be a significant boost to the Working for Families payments. From April 2023, the family tax credit will increase by another $9 a week for the eldest child, taking it to $136 a week, and by $7 a week for the subsequent child, taking it to $111 a week. Best Start 2 will lift by $4 a week to $69 a week. Now, along with previous increases to the family tax credit, a family with 2 children on a median family income for Working for Families recipients are now receiving over $1,300 more a year since we took office. For families with young children, that climbs to over $3,600 for families receiving the Best Start payment. This is the kind of targeted support that not only reaches those who need it most, it is support we can afford, that unlike across-the-board tax cuts, won't have a significant impact on inflation and make the problem worse. You will have heard it said endlessly over the last 3 years that it's been a tough time, and it has, undeniably. Sometimes people ask me at a more personal level how I keep going. 2 reasons: because a powerful intervention, otherwise known as a cup of tea, and because I am an optimist. We have an amazing country with incredible people, and we owe it to those people to keep up our unrelenting focus on what matters most to them: the dignity of decent work, the best possible start for kids, affordable housing, health and education that people can rely on in a well-cared-for environment. And while I cannot tell you what might come our way next, because those are predictions I have learnt to stay well away from, I can tell you that Labour is the party who can tackle it head on and make the progress we need and we deserve as a nation. I am here for that. You are here for that. So, ladies and gentlemen, bring it on. Goodness, quite the audience that will have beyond your... I mean, it's a choice. It's up to you.
How would we know your flavour?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean... All right. You've obviously heard enough from me. I'll fire away. Cost of living is front of mind for New Zealanders right now, and it's front of mind for us as their government. We've continually looked at ways that we can ease the pressures that New Zealanders are facing, and we know one of the biggest costs they face is childcare.
Yeah, how does this offering compare to anything what the National Party is offering Kiwis at the moment?
Two clear differences between the offering here from the Labour government. One is we know that this will make a significant difference. Over 50% of families eligible for significant weekly support around childcare. The second reason this is better than a tax cut, not only is it more generous, it will not be inflationary, thereby not making the problem worse. It's also worth contrasting. You heard me share today a few figures. For a family, two parents working, getting roughly $26 an hour, $250 a week in support. Contrast that with tax cuts, which in some cases for workers will be as low as just over $2 a week. It's a big difference.
There's a lot of increasing costs around obviously sort of transport and other measures that you can target for cost of living. Specifically, why childcare?
Childcare is one of the biggest costs that families face, particularly when they have young children. So this is a subsidy that will support over 50% of families at an increased rate than what we had previously. Of course, it makes a difference for those both with kids in early childhood, but also those who may need school holiday care or after-hours care.
But what about those New Zealanders who don't have families, who are still struggling, who are looking at this and saying, what's in it for me? I don't get anything and I'm really finding it tough.
Keep in mind, this is one of a suite of measures that we've focused on as a government. It sits alongside half-price public transport, a 25-cent reduction of fuel costs at the pump, and of course the cost of living payment that went to every income earner earning $70,000 or less, regardless of their family status. We've worked hard to make sure that we're taking initiatives across the board to reach as many low and middle income New Zealanders that we can.
And so does this mean that you'll be expecting sort of childcare and ECE to be one of the sort of fronts of the election that you're going to be fighting with?
We've already had a childcare review underway because we recognise that this is one of the most significant costs facing working families. We've pulled this part out of that review and we've sped it up because we see it as being incredibly important in these tough times to support families in a targeted way as much as we can.
What about beneficiary families who don't necessarily need the childcare subsidies?
I think important to keep in mind that here, those families who may be receiving government support, if they are in study or training, can access this support, this subsidy. Also, even if they aren't in work or training, they can access the subsidy for up to 9 hours a week. So actually it reaches a vast number of potential families.
Half price public transport for most people, the fuel subsidy, that all ends in a few months' time. You say 2023 is going to be tougher for people. You're going to have to do more to support them with the cost of living.
Here, first of all, a focus on what is a significant initiative today on the cost of living, which sits alongside family tax credit increases. We've just done a second one in as many as 18 months to again boost support for families. And in most cases, that would far outstrip the support they would get through National's tax cuts, which leaves some families with as little as $2 a week. Half-price public transport and fuel, of course, and we've said that we will continue assessing what more could and should be done to support our families.
Why do you say 2023 is going to be tougher?
Oh, just because you look at the global predictions coming out of the likes of the IMF, they're all predicting a slow in economic growth. And of course, it's very difficult to estimate what's going to happen with some of our major global trading partners, the likes of China. We are prepared though. And one point I'd make here clearly, New Zealanders only need to look at our record in times of economic difficulty to see the strong foundations that we have built. That will stand us in good stead in 2023. It also puts us in the best possible position to take on whatever internationally comes our way.
Why not fees-free early childhood?
just making it free across the board. Well, of course, already we have 20 hours free for those 3 and up, and that's a significant policy for New Zealanders. Making it free across the board is billions of dollars. What we're focused on here is how can we help those families who need it the most at the moment, who have the least discretionary income. We're reaching over 50% of families with this initiative, and nearly all sole parents. We predict it will reach between 93 and 97% of sole parent families. That's significant.
How would you describe how the conference went?
Oh, I mean, you know, what's really stood out for me is just the positivity of everyone who's been here. And look, I put that down to a couple of things. It's the first chance everyone's had to come together for a couple of years. And that by its very nature will make it feel like a bit of a reunion. But there's also a buoyancy here. People are really proud of what we've done. And I think they feel buoyed looking to 2023. They're looking forward with confidence, with optimism and a plan, because that's what Labour has.
People are also worried about a national government.
Oh, well, that's a constant emotion for Labour parties.
Are some of your backbench MPs feeling positive? I mean, going into the 2023 election, you're going to lose some of them.
Oh, I would say that yes, they are. Look, regardless of the party vote that you have when you come into government, there is always change. We always have retirements. We will always have changes in seats and the way they're allocated. Every MP who's come in the whole time I've known is always prepared for both the expected and unexpected. But I would say that our caucus remains entirely optimistic and confident because of the plan we have for 2023.
You've said before that back to childcare, that sort of blue skies thinking is expanding childcare to universally.
I was asked
to every family, something that you would like to do and something that you would hope to be.
There's a number of things that if there were no limitation on our budgets, that of course as a government we would like to do. And you know, as a Labour government, making sure that education is more accessible is one of them. This is one way that we can do that though. We already have, for those aged 3 plus, roughly 3/4 of our population accessing early childhood education. We want to make that number greater, and that's what this policy is all about.
And obviously the fuel tax is scheduled to go back on in January, and a lot of people may have been expecting to see that today. Does that mean that the fuel tax is 100% going back on?
Cabinet has made no decisions at this point over those initiatives that we've expanded out till the end of January. That includes the fuel tax reduction and, of course, half-price public transport. And that's simply because we're continuing to assess what is happening with oil prices. Do want to, of course, just reinforce that our plans with public transport already are to make sure those on lowest incomes, those who carry a community services card, will continue to get half-price public transport. That is already policy.
What do you say to your supporters who are a little bit nervous about next year's election?
You know, from what I know of our supporters, they are always ready to face an election, to do it with confidence, to do it with optimism, because they believe, and I believe, that Labour is the government that has the experience, the team and the plan to take us through whatever comes in 2023.
It's not the gallery clipping.
Yeah, no, maybe don't ask them, ask them. Okay, well, maybe just a couple more on this
yesterday,
side.
Mr. Robertson used, "We've got this," and you said, "Bring it on."
Yeah.
What's the election slogan?
Oh, we haven't quite workshopped that one, but thank you for raising that. We've got a live audience here to test a couple of lines, but no, that's not something that we've been working on at this stage. We're still governing.
There has been a lot of talk about the national alternative over the last 3 days. Is relentless positivity dead?
No, not at all. I'd still like to think that you'll see exactly the same approach that I've always taken to politics in the way I talk about the opposition. It's all about the straight policy contrast. But we've got to remind people that it is ultimately a choice between the Labour government that they know and have experienced in the last 5 years versus a plan which we've actually seen modelled recently in the UK and how damaging that has been to that economy. I think it's our job to draw that contrast, particularly in an election year.
Is calling the opposition leader Liz Luxon a straight policy contrast?
Oh, look, I'm sure the Minister of Finance is always happy to stand by his statements. Yeah. Oh, look, I stand by the approach that we've taken to politics over the last 5 years. And I do believe that we have modelled doing politics differently. And again, we'll carry that through to 2023. All right, last couple of questions.
Be looking at those measures such as the fuel tax and half-price public
Little,
transport.
as close as we can to, of course, when they're scheduled to lift. And that's just so we can take into account the environment at the time and the prices at the time.
Those are very
Okay.
expensive though. How can we afford to
Sorry,
those two, especially fuel tax.
Yeah.
It's very expensive.
And we have to, and of course we factor that in with every decision.
Simon,
All
how
right,
do you
okay, last two. Simon,
How do you
and then
reconcile
Simon
the
and
fuel
Ri-
tax,
Richard.
continuing the fuel tax with environmental considerations, particularly zero carbon?
You've already heard across the course of this conference some of what we've been able to do on lowering our emissions from transport, a 15% reduction through the emissions of imported cars in 6 months, a tripling of imported electric vehicles. We are working very hard to reduce down the emissions profile of our congestion of the way that we travel, and of course we've increased public transport subsidies. But we always knew this had to be a transition. And what we were seeing was a very jarring price of fuel at the pump without the ability for people in a timely way to plan for and make that transition. So that's why we stepped in.
Is the CRL costs, lack of bus drivers, a whole lot of other related issues? Isn't our crisis in transport in Auckland that needs special government attention?
I think we've had a crisis of low wages in New Zealand. That as a Labour government, we have been working hard to reverse. You already heard me speak to the significant increase in wages that we have overseen as a government. That's been through very direct, in some cases, intervention, in other cases of lifting of salaries that we are directly responsible for. We've recently just announced increases so that bus drivers will receive higher wages to try and overcome some of the issues we've seen. And of course, we can't forget the impact that fair pay agreements will have for those lowest wage workers. You can see that when contractors race to the bottom by reducing their conditions for workers in order to get contracts, the impact it has on people's lives, both as drivers, but also those who use public transport. All right, let's finish up there. Thanks, everyone.
Can I just quickly ask you? I mean, this obviously conference and stuff.